So I'm just going to share my screen to begin with. I do apologize. This is my first real time using Google Meets, so there might be some teething problems, but it should be okay. Can everyone see my screen okay?
Yes.
Perfect. So yeah, as Peru said, my name is Gary Griffiths and I work at ISANS, which is Immigrant Services Association of Nova Scotia. So a couple of disclaimers on questions. If you do have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. We will have hopefully around 15 minutes at the end to cover any questions as well. So if you think it's something that can wait, then that's fine, but I'm happy to be interrupted as well. Secondly, you might hear the sound of gentle wailing in the background. It's not a child, it's my cat, who seems to have somehow evolved to have the same meow as a child who needs feeding, which is quite smart of her. But that is what that sound is. You don't have to be concerned if you hear that. She just wants attention, I think. So today we're going to talk about strategies for adult and young adult literacy learners. And I guess the genesis for this is that, like much of you, I'm sure, my career path really began with teaching EAL, so English for academic purposes, sorry, EAP, English for academic purposes. So I spent, 8 or 9 years working in private language schools here, back home in England, in Asia. So all of my training really, and all of the work I'd ever done in a professional capacity was with people who were planning on going to university. So the focus was really on thesis statements and body paragraphs and summaries and things like that. And then when I got a job at ISANS a few years ago, I was placed with literacy learners, and it was something I'd never done before. And I remember I had some fantastic training. I had a fantastic mentor there called Ali. So we were well prepared. But then when you step in the classroom with that type of student, you realize very quickly that you're suddenly teaching a completely different job, because this is not the same as working with people who have had years of formal schooling, completely understand learning strategies, completely understand how to behave in the classroom. It's a different job. And together we kind of started developing support materials for new teachers. Eventually I moved into a leadership role, so we were doing some teacher training as well. And this is stuff we've developed from that teacher training, from previous materials that already existed, and some updated stuff as well. So our agenda today, firstly, just to introduce you to ISANS and then talk about some of the literacy programs at ISANS. Then we'll get into what does a literacy learner look like, the strengths they have, the challenges they face. And then we'll talk about some teaching tips and strategies before maybe 10 minutes for discussion questions together. And then we'll have a bit of a Q&A at the end. So firstly, ISANS stands for Immigration Services Association of Nova Scotia. We've got several locations across the city. We've got one on Desmond Avenue, one at Mumford, and one on Joe Howe as well, just down by the Arm. We are the leading deliverer of settlement services in Atlantic Canada. Our vision is a community where all can belong and grow, and our mission is helping immigrants build a future in Nova Scotia. We offer lots and lots and lots of programs and services. It's not just the language side of it. We have refugee resettlement services, community integration services. We work a lot on employment, helping refugees find work, helping immigrants find work, business and workforce. We have blended classes. We have online classes. We have on-site only classes. And of course, language services where I work. And within language services, we have lots of programs and programs that cater for literacy clients, but not exclusively. Like some of these are exclusively literacy, but some of them we have leveled classes. So some of them are literacy, some of them are for what we call mainstream students. And just while we're here as well, you will hear me say students and clients interchangeably. They basically mean the same thing, but we try to use the word clients within ISANS. So my brain usually goes there, but I kind of mean students as well. So our link classes for literacy, we have 4 levels: LA, LB, LC, and LD. We'll get more into what those levels represent soon. We have a literacy transition program. So this program is for students who join ISANS at our very lowest level, and it's just a short prep program. So when they do enter the classroom, they're familiar with basic classroom instructions, basic classroom behaviors. We have a 45 plus class, which is more focused around conversation. So it's 45 plus, but I would say the majority of students in that class are 60 plus, 65 plus, and it's more conversational rather than teaching them reading and writing skills. We have outreach, which is community outreach. So we have instructors go into clients' homes and work with them one-on-one. We have English in the workplace, which I would say the majority aren't literacy learners, but we do have a fair amount in there, which is where we visit clients in their workplace and work alongside their employees to kind of develop the language they need. We have Mum and Baby, which is a very interesting class. The classroom is close to mine, and sometimes I walk past and there's just babies doing headstands and rolling around while an English lesson goes on at the same time. I have a lot of respect for those instructors because it's a lot of work, but also really valuable for young mothers as well. We have the Young Adult Literacy Program, which I guess would be most relevant to most of you because it's serving a similar client base that you are. We have LADS for deaf students, and kind of an umbrella over all of this is our accessibility support program. So that's specialists working with any clients who have undiagnosed learning disabilities or physical disabilities, which mean they need a wheelchair, they need special equipment, anything like that. So why is a student in a literacy class at ISANS? As I said, we do have mainstream classes as well, but there is a percentage of our student base who ends up in our literacy stream. And the reason for this is when they go to LENS, which is an assessment body on Quimple Road who assess the language level of new immigrants to Canada, they're given, I don't know exactly the type of test they're given, but they're given a test which kind of decides whether they should be taking the literacy assessment or the mainstream assessment. So I do know one of the markers for that is whether they have under a certain amount of years of formal education in their home country. With us, it's kind of 0 to 6 or 7 years. We consider it to be a literacy client if they have under those years of education. They're also a literacy client if they have significant reading and writing challenges, difficulty with classroom strategies, and a lack of metacognitive skills. So thinking about thinking. So what do our literacy clients look like? Their strengths are that they have a wealth of life experience. I think there's a tendency in education to, I think patronize is too strong of a way of putting it, but we downplay clients' capabilities because they lack language skills sometimes. And what I mean by this is just kind of, I've seen instructors arrange class outings and they're very concerned about the clients being on the buses alone. And it's trying to remind them that even though their language skills might not be there, they're still incredibly resilient people because they've managed to navigate themselves out of some pretty desperate situations to get here. So that just shows they do have a resilience. So despite language difficulties, they do have that strength. Communication skills, of course, is a strength, like listening and speaking, I mean, because they tend to have, again, grown up in areas where they've had to develop some listening and speaking skills to get by, even if they haven't got the reading and writing to go along with it. For our learners, at least, I don't know how it is for you, but there's a lot of enthusiasm because they usually come from backgrounds where they haven't been allowed to study. And also they tend to have a lot of practical skills as well. There are, of course, challenges though, and I'm sure a lot of these are quite familiar to most of you as well. So limited learning strategies, I think, is the biggest one. Without ever having that background in formal education, They haven't necessarily had the chance to develop classroom behaviors, knowing when the teacher is talking not to interrupt, knowing not just to stand up in the middle of class and walk over to the wall, knowing how to look at a worksheet and understand this is where I write my name, this is where I write the date. They don't have that grounding. And I think a lot of things fall apart when we expect them to do certain things in the classroom instinctively, but they don't have that instinct. Health problems and trauma as well, and undiagnosed learning disabilities, that's another biggie for us, because again, if they come from environments where growing up they didn't have access to healthcare where these things could be diagnosed, they just kind of enter being teenagers or being young adults without knowing that they're dyslexic or without knowing that they have ADHD. Reading and writing is not often used outside of class unless they are in school. Regression, we notice after short breaks, even a lot of regression in our clients. And I mean, I can't even imagine what it's like for you guys, where you have students who go away for 8 weeks in the summer and then come back. That's a significant amount of regression, I think. So I guess you have to do a lot of kind of catch up in September to make sure you're getting them back up to the level they need to be at. And another one for me, this is the main thing I noticed when I started working with these types of learners, was a lack of adult appropriate material. And I think the tension between needing to provide types of worksheets and types of materials that we would normally give to children, while also balancing that with the fact that we are dealing with young adults, is a big challenge, because it just doesn't really exist out there. Like, I've looked, maybe I've been looking in the wrong places, but there is not an abundance of literacy material out there and literacy activities and worksheets out there for adults. You normally find it, and there's normally kind of very infantile pictures on there of cuddly teddy bears and puppies and things like that. And you feel very uncomfortable giving that to young adults or adults. So we end up developing a lot of our own materials for that reason. So briefly, the literacy levels at ISANS, as I said, we have 4 levels. We have LA, LB, LC, and LD. LA clients are kind of the lowest we have in the organization, and they're working on a letter basis. So when they come into our program, often they can't even hold a pen. They've never kind of learned how to hold a pen and how to form shapes. So we do a lot of work on letter shapes, on up lines, sideways lines, circles, and then eventually develop into tracing the alphabet, copying the alphabet. And by the time they leave LA, they should be able to write the alphabet. That's kind of and start to kind of decode simple words as well. By the time they get into LB, they're on a word level. So then it's about developing an understanding of sight words, starting to build their vocabulary, starting to look at phonics. LC is sentences. So then we're looking at what's a verb, what's a subject, what's an object. How do you describe things? How do you see WH questions? And then in LD, they start to work on paragraphs. So short passages of writing, short reading passages, questions with longer answers. And then after LD, they jump kind of sideways into our mainstream program, and they're kind of treated like any other client would be. The time it takes to go through these 4 programs really varies. It can take a year and a half, it can take 3 years, it can take 4 years. It really depends on the learner and how quickly they pick up the skills. So just to give you some simple examples of worksheets we'd be using with the different levels, for an LA client, for example, this is assuming we've gone through kind of the phases of teaching them how to hold a pen if they don't know how to. They'll be doing simple tracing activities with the alphabet, working on directionality of letters, and any reading we do with them would be heavily scaffolded, heavily repeated, and something we kind of revisit every day to make sure they're continually working on these things. For LB, we're starting to work with really, really short sentences and simple words. And we're still working on letters, but now we're really kind of drilling into letter formation in terms of what's a small letter, what's a tall letter, how legible is your writing, starting to work on filling out personal information forms and things like that, because no matter their level, when they're outside of an ISANS classroom in the community, they have to negotiate this sort of activity, this sort of task, if they go to the doctor, if they're doing anything to do with housing. So we try and kind of get personal information in there really, really early. LC, so our third level of literacy. Now we're working with multiple sentences on one page. We're looking at different kinds of verbs. We're working on, when you're writing a sentence, spacing. And again, continuing to reinforce everything they've done in LA and LB as well. By the time they get to LD, like I said, paragraphs, short answer questions, and we're really kind of weaving in a lot of mainstream stuff now to make sure when they do make the jump, they're ready, picking up the pace a lot and not being so explicit with our instructions. So that's kind of an overview of ISANS, our programs, and what we do in literacy. And now I want to talk about 5 tips and strategies. So these are things we can involve in our classes that just makes life a little bit easier for ourselves. And this is a mixture of what I picked up off previous team leads and my peers, and just stuff that works for me as well. So the first one is just a couple of teaching essentials that I think we need to remember when we're working with this type of client. So firstly, short activities is a huge help, I find. When I first started working in literacy, my biggest mistake was 15-20 minute activities that kind of blended into other activities, and then a few of them just went really, really badly, quite honestly. And I realized after 10 minutes the students' attention had disappeared and they'd lost track of what they were doing. They couldn't revisit what they'd worked on at the start of the activity and realized that they still should be applying that 15 minutes later. And it just became a bit of a mess. And I couldn't work out why. But breaking activities down into really small chunks was a solution for me. So now, I mean, if you saw my lesson plan now, I always put how many minutes I think each task will take, and it's just 5, 5, 10, 5, 5, 2. It sometimes feels like we're creating more work by doing that, because we can't just kind of give the activity and 20 minutes later revisit it after checking in on them. But it does, I find, make the class go a lot smoother, especially with the lowest levels. Movement and rhythm is really important. A lot of our client base, they come from cultures where music is incredibly important to learning and incredibly important to how they operate day to day and how they communicate. So I always find introducing taps whenever we're doing something, a lot of our clients really respond to that and find it easier to remember when we do. Reduction in cognitive load and no multitasking. So again, the first one kind of ties into shorter activities and not giving literacy clients too much to think about in one go, because it can become quite overwhelming, I think, when it's taking so much to focus on one activity. And that ties into multitasking as well. Again, when I was teaching academic English, you'd kind of set up the activity, but as they were doing it, you'd also be talking about the activity, reminding them of things they had to do. But I find with lower level learners, if you give them the activity, I try and be quiet unless they ask me a question or are evidently struggling, because it takes a lot to focus on what they're doing and listen to what I'm saying. So I try to really, and when I'm designing activities as well, try to make sure only one skill is needed to complete the activity, only one metacognitive strategy, only one learning strategy is needed, because it can become a bit much, I think, otherwise. Use of familiar formatting with worksheets. So we really encourage our instructors to use lots of white space, to use big fonts, and when they are using font, to as often as possible use Comic Sans and Century Gothic. And the reason for that is those are the two fonts that use an alphabet that will be most familiar to what the clients are using day to day. With most of the other fonts, the G looks a bit strange, or the A looks a bit strange. I think sometimes the Q is a bit weird as well. But with those two, it tends to be kind of the shapes that we've been teaching them to trace. And again, just anecdotally, when I first started with literacy, I did not do that several times. And I had lots of clients asking me, what letter is this? And oh, it's A, but it's not an A they've ever encountered before. So this would be a good example of what not to do. Incredibly busy worksheet, quite difficult to understand what the task even is. If you haven't encountered something like this before, really difficult to kind of understand what the task is. And there's just a lot going on. So if you gave this to a really low level client, it would be very confusing for them. Classroom routine. This is massive, and it's something we really reiterate again and again to our new instructors. Have a classroom routine. Have a classroom routine that you're super comfortable with, and have one that your clients, your students are super comfortable with as well. So the usual topics of the routines would be calendar work, days of the week, months, the numbers on a calendar, rearranging the numbers, rearranging the days of the week, looking at usual numbers, normally 1 to 10 with the lower levels. Weather's really important, especially in the climate we live in, I think, because we get regular weather alerts because of weather events that are happening, and I think we all know that that's going to increase quite a lot over the next decades as well. So we need to make sure as quickly as possible that the students are armed with a knowledge about what the different weather symbols mean. So if they go onto a weather website, they can quickly identify what's coming. Sight word lists is another part of the daily routine. So words that they see regularly in any sort of text, alphabet, and emotions as well. So something we really try and work on is something called zones of regulation. And I think it was developed by one of my colleagues. I don't think it's a universal thing, the zones of regulation, but it's just a way of using emojis to really express how a student is feeling on that day. So if they are feeling stressed and overwhelmed and angry, they can communicate it to us easily without having to reach for language they don't necessarily have to tell us that they're feeling that way. And obviously then we can kind of adapt how we're behaving with them based around that. So an example of an LA routine. So again, LA is the lowest level we've got in literacy. We might start every single class with a how are you circle. So we go around the classroom asking how each other are, simple answers. Then maybe with some phonics. So we'll do a directionality worksheet. Sorry, alphabet more than phonics. Do a directionality worksheet or work on simple letter sounds. We might review the days of the week. I say might. By might, I mean we definitely will, because we're always talking about what day it is today. So that's something that we revisit again and again. Months, and then a calendar review. And this would probably take around an hour with an LA class, which it doesn't seem like a lot for an hour. But when you really get into the worksheets that kind of supplement this, when you get into how explicitly the instruction needs to be, it does take around an hour sometimes. For an LD class though, which again is our highest literacy level, the routine at the beginning of the class is a lot more fluid, and there's a lot more client autonomy with it as well. So we'd probably give them classroom jobs that they know they have to do every day. And there's a lot more expectation that they will do those independently without being asked that they need to do it. So someone will have to write the date on the board. Someone will have to work with temperatures. Someone will have to read the sight words out. And usually, because this routine is taking place every single day, the clients are very, very familiar with this. So they don't need to be reminded, especially by the time they're in LD, especially then. So routines build familiarity and they build confidence. And I think it's vitally important for literacy students to have confidence, because their education and the classroom is probably something that creates a lot of anxiety and stress for them, as anything for us does when we don't know how to do it and we feel embarrassed about the fact that we can't do it. It's a very stressful environment to be in. So if we can give them something for the first 20 or 30 minutes at the start of the class that they do every day, that they can walk into the classroom and they know exactly what's coming and they know they can do it, it's really helpful for them. And it creates an early win every day. I find they achieve something at the start of every single lesson that kind of makes them feel good, and that makes everything that comes after it a lot easier. And it helps with lesson planning as well. I mean, if you do this with your learners, you can cut down on a lot of lesson planning. If the first 20 or 30 minutes look similar, it means there's 20 or 30-minute less planning time you need to do. And I kind of need to stress here, this would be for a classroom with only literacy clients, of course. But you could kind of build in routines that do accommodate your more traditional learners as well. Scaffolding, support with gradual independence. Scaffolding is something we really try and involve every day in the classroom, every week in the classroom. And it's something that if we're doing it well, the student doesn't really notice that we're doing it. But it's something that's very helpful to them to have. So if we're scaffolding a task, I mean, I guess the first thing is you're working your way backwards. You've got the end task in goal. You know, at the end of the week, they have a small assessment maybe that they need to do, or a skill using task that they need to do. And we work our way back from that task and figure out how much support we need to give to every single small part of that task and how much we need to scaffold it. So the first thing, I guess, would be discussing the tasks. So in an adult or young adult centered learning environment, we want to draw on the students' experiences as much as is possible. So early discussions on a task, how does that reflect their real life? When have they experienced a similar kind of task or topic in their real lives? Then we want to break the task into small chunks. So when we look at a worksheet, we're kind of disassembling it and breaking it down into every single small piece of information that they would need to understand it. And again, my boss, Ali, previously, she used to always talk about whole part whole, which is the same sort of idea. Looking at it as a whole and then breaking it into little pieces that we can individually work on to help them understand the task. And once you've done all that, modeling it. So this is me doing it, doing the task as a class, doing the task in small groups, and then eventually doing the task independently. So we're moving away slowly. So by the certain point, they are able to do these tasks without any help. So at ISANS, I guess another way we differ is all of our instruction is real world tasks. So we're preparing them for stuff they would need in the community to survive. So one task might be we're going to give them an assessment where they have to answer questions about a Halifax bus schedule, for example. So thinking about a task like this, if we know, okay, on Friday, it's Monday, on Friday, I know I want to give them an assessment where they have to answer some simple questions about a bus schedule. And just to clarify, the bus schedule you're looking at now would be a very, very high level literacy learner would give to. We would not give that to them when they were in LA to LC, or even at the beginning of LD, I wouldn't say. But hypothetically, if we looked at that task, what would they need to know to succeed in an assessment for it? And how could we break it into small chunks? So firstly, they need to know where to look for important information. As people that have gone through formal education, we know that the important information on a document is normally at the top. That's where the title is. That's where the thing you need to look at first is. So working on something like that, working on making sure their eyes go to the top of the page. We'd need to think about left to right writing. So if you've got clients from countries where their script goes from right to left, we'd need to, again, reiterate that and re-emphasize you start here and go this way. Reading vertical text, which is, I mean, I lived in South Korea for a few years and learnt the alphabet there. And even for me, when I was looking at a bus schedule where it was vertical, I had to literally crane my neck to look at it. It just didn't fill in the blanks of the symbols when I was trying to look at it any other way. So even recognizing that text is vertical, we'd need to scaffold up to. How to understand a new time format. So if you look at the time here, 6:25 like we understand that that's 6:25 a.m., but a literacy learner absolutely wouldn't, especially in the low levels. So working around AM and PM and how that's represented differently sometimes. Would have to look at the fact that moving downwards represents a progression of time, and recognizing place names as well. So capital letter, so it's probably a name or a place name. So all of these things go into understanding any sort of task we wanted to go do about a bus schedule. So the importance of scaffolding, just to quickly wrap up, would be it helps us break down tasks into small chunks. It allows for explicit instruction. It encourages group work and independent study, and it allows us to kind of slowly move away from the client so they feel supported until they need to do an activity independently. The fourth little tip is recycling. So when we are working with learners where there is a lot of repetition involved, there's always an anxiety, I think, that we're being boring as instructors and just giving them the same thing to do every day, and that kind of eye roll you sometimes get where they're like, I've done this 100 times in the past month, why are we doing it again? But I think recycling and repetition is important, and it doesn't have to always look the same. We can try and keep it as interesting as possible. So if we take new vocabulary as an example, so I know for this week we have some sort of assessment we're scaffolding and building towards, and I know the fact that the students have to understand this vocabulary, have to be able to read it, to be able to spell it, to be able to hear it by the end of the week. But I don't want to just kind of give them the same materials every single day to work on vocabulary. So a few different ways to present it could be a tracing activity to start with. So again, we're revisiting stuff they should have learned early on in literacy about letter formation and letter heights. Trace, copy, very simple instructions. So we could do this for all of the words. We could also use images to link the words to a picture, so it does solidify itself in their minds even stronger. We could work on physically spelling the words just to give them a break from always writing or drawing lines. So have them cut out the alphabet and spell the words this way, then mix up the letters and spell it, make a game out of it where they're in a race to see who can spell it the fastest in groups or pairs. Does cause quite a lot of mess though, unless they've got laminated letters already. And always with this, kind of give them 2 sets of each letter, of course, because not most, but a lot of words have letters that repeat themselves. Another activity could be fixing the spelling. So they've done no end of work on copying the word, of then writing it independently. Now they've got to kind of refigure the letters if they're out of order. And we do a lot of alphabet out of order work as well, because if we're always presenting them the letters in the correct order, they can kind of memorize it but not fully understand it. But if we do it out of order, they can learn those skills. Read, cover, write, and check is something we do a lot. So they look at the word, they cover it, they copy it, they check their mistake, and then they write it again. And in an activity like this, there's so many good learning strategies kind of baked into it. The idea of that you have to check your work is not something that a lot of people do. Correcting your mistakes so you don't repeat the mistake is another thing as well. So I like this one because it teaches them a few different things in one go. So recycling, as I said, it allows for non-tedious repetition. I'm sure there's an antonym for the word tedious, but I wouldn't go as far as saying it's exciting repetition. So I'm not sure what that word would be. It targets different learning strategies for task completion, and it gives them a chance of developing and using transferable skills as well, which I know, like I'm sure in your teacher training you did a lot of work on metacognition and the idea of transferring skills. And again, with literacy learners, you don't see a high level of that when we first meet them. So teaching them that skills are transferable and when the right time is to transfer that skill is important, and something we can do with a lot of these activities. And again, this does cut down on planning time. Really do not be afraid of reusing worksheets with literacy learners. Seeing the same thing again and again is okay. It builds familiarity, and it helps them become confident with something as well. And the final tip, really, because we've only got 5 or 6 minutes until we'll do some questions, is rethinking what progress looks like with these types of learners. It's really difficult to measure progress of a literacy learner with the progress of a mainstream learner. And just to kind of like highlight this, in our mainstream classes at ISANS, progression is based around portfolio-based language assessment. So all of the mainstream clients have binders and they collect artifacts. So essentially they collect assessments. So depending on the level, let's say for a CLB2 class, they'll be having 1 assessment a week. And these assessments, when they have 8 in each skill, that means they can progress to the next level. So a CLB2 client has 8, 8, 8, 8. Now they can move into CLB3. And this is all built around, as I mentioned earlier, real world tasks. So our themes are health or housing or banking, shopping, what things to do in the community. But as you can imagine, this doesn't necessarily work for literacy learners because they need learning strategies to understand what to do in these assessments and how to complete these assessments. So it's not fair to judge them by these standards because they don't have the foundational knowledge to to do it. So I find those sorts of assessments, they make a lot of incorrect assumptions. And what they do is they incorrectly assume that all students in the class can understand text formatting. They can understand where they look on the page to write their name. They can understand that the little line here means they need to fill in the blank with something. These are all things I think we take for granted, but these clients don't necessarily know. But if they're coming into a classroom and everything's based around assessments and worksheets that were given to everyone else, they won't succeed. Something as simple as understanding that a symbol represents a sound and that those blended together represent a word. I mean, with any sort of listening or speaking assessment, this is hugely important to know. Assessment etiquette. So an assessment has a time limit. In an assessment, you can't cheat. In an assessment, you can't talk. Again, these are all things we need to explicitly teach. We can't just assume that they know this already. The difference between an assessment and a skill building task, and building up this idea that an assessment is the final thing you do for something, and this is what signifies how well you can do something, whereas all the stuff you did before that is preparing for it. Basic instructions: underline, cross out, circle. A tick means good, a cross means not good, and all those sorts of things. That's what mainstream assessment assumes. So to get around this, I don't know how long ago they developed them. It was before my time, but the previous team leads and the previous supervisors developed skill and strategy checklists for the literacy classes. So it's more of a holistic way of progression. So instead of just collecting assessments, we give them a few little assessments to do, but it's not really what we base progression around. Instead, the clients have a skill and strategy checklist, and I believe they were developed using ESL for All, which I'm not sure how commonly this book is used in the school system, but it's a bit of a Bible for us. There's some fantastic information in there. You can download the PDF free as well. So you don't need to order a copy of it. It is free online, and it's got loads of teaching strategies. It's got loads of example activities you can do, a lot of kind of just how to work with literacy clients, lots of ideas in there. So our strategy checklists were built around I think it was the I can statements in this book. And we have strategies for reading, writing, social, numeracy, and digital. And we have different strategies for each level as well, with some overlap, because we are constantly reinforcing things. So I know this is really small. I'll kind of zoom in and show you some bigger ones soon. So this is just an example of what the skills and strategy checklist looks like. So what our instructors have to do is, at the end of every theme, they have to produce a monthly report. And the monthly report includes strategy checklists for reading, writing, numeracy, and social and classroom behavior. And throughout the month, the instructors are kind of looking at how well, the clients are working on these strategies and how well they're developing them as well. And the C represents that this client has completed this strategy. So an example of the skills and strategy checklists for an LA class would be, they're able to identify letters of the alphabet from memory using lowercase letters. They can do it by name with upper and lowercase letters. They can use flashcards to read familiar names out. They can match letters sequentially on a worksheet. They can cut out letters that you tell them to from a newspaper or a flyer. They can match or sort the letters. And this is just a very small snapshot of a much bigger skills and strategy checklists that we have for them. And we just find if we take a more holistic way of looking at progression, where assessments do play a part, but really we're looking at how well are they developing these classroom and learning strategies, it does mean we have a better idea of when they are ready to move into the next level, and it gives us a chance to work on these learning strategies before they would eventually enter a mainstream class and be expected to know them all already. So obviously, like I said, there are lots of benefits to them. It gives them a foundation. It allows strategies to become a little more measurable. It gives them confidence with achievable goals, and it allows clients to feel motivated outside of the stress of tests and assessments. There are some challenges with it. I'm not going to deny that. I find the biggest challenge with having strategy checklists as a measurement for when they pass a level is it's a really difficult thing to communicate to low-level students, because it's quite a nuanced thing to be talking about learning strategies and metacognitive skills. That's not something that's easy to explain. Lots of teachers have different ways of doing it. I personally like can do statements. So I can do this, and then the student can check it off. But that is probably the biggest challenge is making sure that it's clearly defined how you progress to a new literacy client. Whereas with mainstream, it's very easy because you can say, okay, you have 8 assessments in reading, writing, listening, and speaking. You've got that. You can go to the next level. But it's not so easy for us. And the second challenge is it does take a lot of instructor training to teach them about the strategy checklist and how best to use it in class, how to kind of create activities around each skill or strategy. So that does take some work as well. But I would say it's like there's a net positive gain to it, in my opinion. So I was going to do some discussion questions, but I have gone a little bit over the 45 minutes. So I thought maybe it'd be better if we open it up to everyone. And I guess the first question I would like to ask is around your own use of teaching strategies in the class. Is there anything that you find really, really helpful to you, like having a routine or scaffolding or recycling material a lot? Is there anything in your classroom that works really well in terms of a teaching strategy?
Hi, Gary.
Hi.
Since everybody else is too afraid to talk.
I need to rest my voice, so thank you.
I'm a learning support teacher. I work at the P to 5 level.
Okay.
We have a very large population of students with English as an additional language. And very often I'll work in partnership with our EAL support person, Joan Chisholm-Whitten, who's fantastic, but her caseload's really huge. So really, I would say classroom teachers and myself collaborate a lot. I can, when I think about routine, I can see that, when I'm getting to know a student or a group of students who are not only acquiring language and social skills and cultural skills, but are also working on the literacy like you had talked about, there's a great deal, you can sense a great deal of apprehension. And so for me, I'm very conscious about every time they come, whether it's individual or small group support, I'm very conscious to establish a really, really predictable routine. So we'll always start with the same thing. And then there'll always be the next thing and always the next thing. And if there's anything new, I generally try to introduce it near the end. And it is always that I do first, where I'm just modeling and they're watching. But I would say in terms of that connection and having them feel comfortable enough so that the brain is relaxed enough that it can learn and process, that for them the routine seems to be simply like crucial. And you can see them relax when they come every time, and they realize after the first week or so, oh, are we doing this first? Yeah, we are. Remember how that goes? And it just immediately puts them at ease. So from my experience, I find that piece is really, really huge.
Yeah, for sure. How many do you do one-on-one, sorry, did you say, or do you have groups?
My schedule fluctuates a lot because I'm also learning center behavior intervention and medical support.
Mm-hmm.
So when I do take them, it tends to be for short, intensive bursts. So like a daily support for a 3 to 4 week period. And then I'll really focus just in on a specific skill, something where the classroom teacher might feel that they really need support with. And typically that tends to be working on the literacy piece, especially sight word knowledge, phonological skills, so that they can start to decode in English, things like that.
Yeah, I mean, that's fantastic that you are using a routine, especially because, as you said, if you only have them for 3 to 4 weeks, there's not a huge amount of time to develop a routine. So you have to kind of get in there early with something simple. So as you said, they recognize what they're doing straight away when they come to class, and they feel comfortable straight away, because that's the key to learning anything, isn't it? Feeling confident and comfortable. So yeah, that's fantastic. Anyone else?
Hi, Gary. I actually just have a quick question for you.
Yeah, for sure.
So I teach classroom English, but right now I'm working with individual students on IPPs that have essentially stopped coming due to a combination of learning barriers and also anxiety as well.
Okay.
And I just heard you talk about how you had included rhythm and even sort of leveraging music as a tool within the classroom to sort of boost that literacy. And I'm just wondering if off the top of your head, you had a suggestion of how I might be able to incorporate that, because the age group that I'm working with, like, they're not English language learners, but they are typically lower literacy levels. And I'm working with kids around the grade 9 age group.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I was kind of taught that by one of the instructors in our stream, and in our team is also a music instructor, in her, like, a part-time music instructor and part-time ESL instructor, and she gave a PD to our team once about it, and it was fascinating, like, using kind of musical rhymes, and I think she would find like really simple beats on a YouTube music video or something, and she would build the vocabulary or build sentences around that beat and making it a fun activity. And that's what she would do. I personally mainly involve kind of tapping out beats, and I find that quite helpful. But to be honest, it's something where there's a lot more scope to how much I could be doing with it, and it's something that I think is for myself worth looking into even more, beyond just kind of simple beats and using music from YouTube. But actually, I'm sure there's been a lot of studies on it and a lot of kind of PDs out there on it. But yeah, it works really well, I find.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
No worries. Any more questions or teaching strategies that anyone has? No? Okay, well, in that case, I will wrap things up. Let me just share my screen one more time with my contact information. So if you did have any questions for me after this, or you just wanted to kind of meet to chat through some ideas, you can get me here. So I'll give you a few seconds to write that down if you need to. So I just a last disclaimer. At the moment, my role at ISANS has changed slightly. So I'm not currently working with literacy learners. I'm supervising some of the higher level classes. But if you got in touch, we could absolutely still talk about it. And the people who are currently working in literacy, I could put you in touch with as well to work with them. But other than that, thank you very much for giving up the last hour of your day. I know the literacy brain is probably there for most of us right now after a day of teaching. So thank you very much for coming. I do appreciate it. And thank you, Peru, for inviting me.